And with that, we're gonna start with Andrew Barrett from Shopify. Andrew is a learning platform lead there, and he's gonna talk about how he's building the environment for solving for the remote first learning and development at Shopify. So I'll pass the mic over to Andrew.
Thank you, Marco. Andrew? Am I going to share my screen? We'll see how this all goes. Cool. Can folks see my screen okay? Awesome. So first, I want to thank the organizers for putting this together so quickly. Like, we were literally talking about what we were all going to be talking about just earlier this week. And so hats off to you for pulling this together. So I'm going to be talking about remote first work environment problem solving, focusing on tools and processes. I work at Shopify. Some folks might be aware of Shopify. It might be a new for others. So wanted to highlight just some aspects of Shopify for those that haven't bumped into us. So we're a leading multi-channel commerce platform. We have over 1 million merchants. Usually if you've had a good shopping experience and it wasn't on a certain A company, then you've probably been on a Shopify platform. We're based in Ottawa, Canada. We have about a little over 5,000 employees. We've grown pretty rapidly. One of the big things that's really key to Shopify is our culture, and that's really informed how we've approached the situation, as well as just in general learning and development processes and tooling and all that sort of stuff. This quote, "Autonomy rules," is pulled from our careers page, and I've joined 4 years ago. It's really held true since then. And really, this idea of the freedom to create your own path, that's been a big part of Shopify and how we've approached the current situation. We were all sent home. We were encouraged to buy what we needed to make our offices what we needed them to be, and Shopify puts a lot of trust in its employees, and so that flows into the processes. This is going to be like, it's just 5 minutes, so you're not going to have like the L&D magic at the end of this. So I think that might come from the discussion. But I'm really happy. There's a lot of the learning and development teams that I work with that are participating on the call, and the reason we can get away with minimal processes is we really at Shopify have domain-focused embedded learning and development teams, and then my team just serves those teams, and in some cases other parts of Shopify that don't have their own L&D team. And part of the process, so much as we have one, is that has worked especially recently, is just having a single point where people can come to get support. They're trying to solve problems. Maybe they're trying to spin up an L&D project. I'm a big fan of, there's a woman, Lori Niles Hoffman, and she has this idea of like having triage in learning and development, and treating it almost like a hospital room where you have to prioritize things very quickly. And so that type of approach works well, where you can be really nimble, deal with problems as they come in, and connect the right people to solve that problem, versus having really planning heavy focus. So that's one area that's been really useful for us. We've really tried to empower our folks at Shopify, not just the learning teams, but just individual people that maybe they're not on a learning team, but so bumping up privileges in our LMS or other tools so that they can get what they need done quickly. That's been something that we've done before. I think we've leaned into that during the last couple of weeks. And then we have this learning guild. So a lot of these things have a Slack presence, but then we also use our tools to have different events. So we've seen folks jumping into the learning guild, sharing ideas on whether it's what are some tools to make things more interactive? How do we solve this particular problem? Maybe there's a great book. So we've really tried to leverage that community during this time, and we've seen folks from that community really step up and serve the needs of Shopify. So that's been awesome. During the Q&A, we have a lot of the leaders from those communities or from those teams that are participating as well. So it'd be great to hear from them directly. And then on top of this, we do have like some soft governance from leadership that help focus our programs and stuff. But that really just comes down to like, if we're going to heavily invest in a particular tool or something like that. Right now, with the COVID situation, we've seen it like an uptick in things like Zoom and trying to get the right team Zoom licenses. And sometimes they hit bumps, but usually we can work together to get those solved. So the key is being real nimble and just trying to move things forward quickly. This is something, this crazy diagram, but it represents our learning ecosystem. It's something that came out of a report from Red Thread Research, and I think Danny is actually on the call. She leads that organization. So we have a ton of different tools available to people at Shopify, learning teams and others, and it can get kind of it can get a little overwhelming. So we don't show people this diagram when we sit down with them, but the idea is we do have all these different pieces and then to do different things. And I encourage folks to go to the Red Thread website and download the report. But it's really, you have all these different things that you need to do as within L&D, and there's different tools that are going to be helpful to help you do those things. And so when we start working with someone, and other learning teams have their own approaches, but in general, you're trying to ask questions. And so rather than jumping into the tool, which often that's what people that haven't done a lot of online learning in the past, they'll just want to like record everything and make like a 2-hour-long video. But starting with the questions, like when does this need to ship? What does success look like? Can you like launch something quickly and iterate on it? Trying to build in like practice and feedback or other types of interaction that sometimes you don't see in online experiences, but you can do that. Those are good questions to ask. Also, like, is this just something that you can create and like it's going to be used for a week and then throw it away? So like, but the answers to these questions can really help us focus in on what are the tools that are going to be helpful for it rather than starting with the tool. So some examples, like we've recently worked with teams that have to onboard a bunch of people. They would normally use like an in-person session or just have meetings and stuff like that. But through working with them, we can identify, okay, well, why don't you chunk it up? Why don't you try and record some videos? Like you can still have, whether it's instructor-led training or something like that, but try and break it up so that you have a bunch of different options. Try it, and if it's not working, be willing to adapt and change it. So we also are really encouraging folks to kind of reduce, reuse, recycle. So using existing resources that maybe aren't learning resources right now, but you have a great article on your internal site. Maybe you have, whether it's Google Docs or the equivalent at Microsoft, then like use that information. If it's available online and you can curate it and let people go through that sequence, then that you can sometimes get something going a lot more quickly. And then if you do want to create something, we're really encouraging teams that we work with to create small chunks so that you can reuse it or pull that out and put something else in, just to keep it really flexible. The things are changing daily, so being really flexible is a real advantage at this point. So thank you. That's my short spiel. Hopefully it was around 5 minutes, and I look forward to entering into the Q&A section.
Thanks, Andrew. Any questions for Andrew and actually the entire team at Shopify, right?
So it's called OneDrive. Is that the Microsoft one, Duke? Wow.
There's a question, Andrew. Any particular onboarding practices that showed up that work well now with remote learning, remote onboarding specifically?
Yeah, that's been where the different learning teams have been really focusing their efforts, is if they have any in-person experience, shifting it to remote first. So we have Maddie on the call, who leads our learning and development team within our support organization, and they've actually been remote first for a long, long time, and so they've been able to leverage the experience that they've built up over these years, and then shared that with some of the other L&D teams. So I don't know, would it be possible to unmute Maddie for a sec just to get his take? Because I think him and the team that he's on they're the experts at Shopify on that.
Hi, am I coming through okay? All right, I have to just give the quick proviso that I'm sitting beside a 5-year-old and we might get a sudden burst of noise, but let's hope not. Yeah, so our team in support, which is effectively a contact center for our software as a service product, has scaled up in size pretty significantly and pretty early on in our scaling. Once we sort of tipped over the 100-person mark or so, we moved aggressively towards a remote work from home model for our support team. And then, of course, as a learning team, we had to flex to that pretty quickly. And so, we looked around in the market, and at the time, this is about 5 years ago, there wasn't a lot of best practices we could look to in the tech space, at least that we could track down. Also, we are in Ottawa as opposed to, say, somewhere in the Valley where it was easier to make direct contacts. And so we forged ahead on our own. And some of the basic sort of best practices that we saw and that we continue to develop were really fairly elementary, but there were things like identifying that a mixed modality of in-person and remote just didn't work when we did have an in-person or an on-site, office. Defaulting to remote always was quite effective. We learned and then were able to sort of lead with some best practices around how to comport yourself on a Zoom call. So just like happened in this call, I think at the beginning, talking about your best practices of muting and when to speak and keeping your questions in the chat. But then also some of the delivery methodology, Andrew and his team have introduced some great tools at Shopify that have helped us be able to sort of move really quickly and pivot really fast when we needed to roll things out. And as a product first company, we have a really sort of frequent product release schedule. I can't remember the numbers, but when it was first sort of told to me, I was pretty staggered by it. And so we're releasing feature training for our contact center team on a weekly basis. So we have to have a really agile delivery model and be able to get this out to a dispersed team of about 2,000 agents across the world really fast in multiple languages and that sort of thing. And so those are all things we were able to share with the rest of Shopify pretty quickly as we went to a fully remote environment. And I think that's been pretty good. There's another sort of factor that helped us be able to do that, which is at Shopify, the support learning development team rolls up under a broader knowledge management umbrella. And so we have some really good sort of knowledge best practices, and the information architecture for us to be able to share those best practices was already in place. It's kind of in our DNA. So it made it easy to sort of branch out and share with the rest of the organization.
There's a question in the chat about why did in-person and remote not work well, and that's something other learning teams have experienced too. And it's often like, when you have people in the room together, it's so easy to forget about the people online. I don't know if we have that situation now that everybody's working from home, but like having just like that baseline just keeps everybody following kind of those same guidelines, and just it's just kind of a level playing field.
Yeah. So hybrid is tough, right? In general. There was also a question I think Justin had from Dropbox around centralized versus decentralized learning model, what the impact is on that when centralized.
Is that more about the team structure, or is that, or because I can talk maybe yeah, okay, cool. So like partially it's just the way Shopify has grown organically and quickly, and I think a lot of the companies represented here are in a similar boat where things suddenly you have another team doing something amazing. And so we just kind of, it worked out that we had these learning teams distributed across the organization, which was working pretty good. They can move very quickly, but then there's some level of connection that helps you move either more quickly or prevents you from like having multiple LMSs or realizing that you have like the same Ruby on Rails intro course, but just like being developed at by multiple folks. So we kind of, it's like a hybrid approach where we have the teams that operate pretty independently. They have different leadership, and then but they can connect in with whether it's my team directly or with each other through these the guild and the different channels. And like in some cases we have like I have a very small team, so we lean heavily on other teams. Like we have an R&D focused team that Jerry Shaw is a lead of, who's a part of this call, and they have chops on like going and pinging APIs to pull data out, and like working with data scientists to like surface it in mode reports and all this sort of thing. So, and all the different teams have different areas of expertise. So then it's, hopefully we can come together and build some stuff that really works for most of Shopify.
Cool. Thank you. Thanks, Andrew. So just to keep the ball moving, we still have the questions, time for Q&A at the end, just as a reminder. So that was Andrew from Shopify.